We're at the table saw again, and I want to talk to you about types of cuts not to make when you're at a table saw. Now, you probably know a lot of these, if not most of them. In fact, you may want to pause the video and jot down what your list is of cuts you should not make on a table saw. Then restart the video and we'll compare lists and see how close we are. Some of them are probably fairly trivial. Some of them maybe will take you by surprise. We'll see. So, the first cut that you don't want to make with a table saw, in fact you can't make with a table saw, is a curved cut. The way the geometry of the blade rotating, if you try to somehow curve by moving the board through the blade, you're just going to bind the blade and kick it back into your face, and it would be a very dangerous operation. So you can't do curved cuts of any kind with a table saw. Fairly obvious, you don't want to make a backwards cut. And by a backwards cut, I mean, the blade is spinning toward you as you stand at the table saw and you push the work into the blade. You don't ever want to try to bring the blade the other way. Clearly, it isn't going to cut, or it isn't going to cut well. I will tell you, though, that it's possible, and I've done this, to put the blade in 180 degrees off so that the teeth of the blade point backwards. The sharp part of the tooth points backwards, so coming toward you, there's no sharpness at all. And what will happen there is you just won't be able to cut. So you don't want to try to cut backwards on a table saw. Some other things you want to put on your list of cuts not to make with a table saw have to do with the type of material that you're trying to cut. You might be tempted, if you're doing some sprinkler pipe, to get the PVC pipe and bring it into the table saw to cut it instead of using some other method like a hacksaw or a manual cutter. Do not, I repeat, do not use a table saw to cut PVC. It's, number one, not safe. Number two, it's not good for the blade, and it won't really do a very good job if you get away with it from a safety point of view. There are some other types of material that you do not want to use with a table saw. For instance, ferrous metals. They don't make a blade to do ferrous metals. They do make a blade to do softer metals like aluminum, but you don't want to use those on anything other than what they're intended to be used on. So be careful what materials you try to cut. No PVC and no tough metal like steel or galvanized pipe. Let's talk about angled cuts with a table saw. The way you make an angled cut is you hold the piece of wood at an angle, at a bevel is what it's called, and you push the work through the blade, holding it constant, holding the bevel constant. The way I do that is with a jig like this, which I put the workpiece on one of this happens to be a 45-degree angle cutting board, and you hold it very rigidly and pass it through the blade. What you don't want to try to do is make an angle cut that isn't held rigidly in something like this particular jig or a bevel gauge that comes with the table saw. So don't try to do an angled cut unless you properly support the workpiece. I mentioned do not try to cut PVC, that's not appropriate. Also, don't try to cut any other kind of plastic material. PVC is sort of a plastic material. You can buy plastic material at the big box store and try, might be tempted to rip a sheet of that plastic stuff in your table saw. Don't do it. So what we've done is we've covered my list of items that materials and types of cuts that you should not make with a table saw. Be interesting to see how it lined up with the list you might have made before we started the video. We hope you liked the video, and hit the like button if you did, and be sure to subscribe, and we'll keep you informed of future content.